Chapter 4. The Colonial Experience. Introduction. In this lecture, we learn about life in the colonies. I mean life as it was actually lived. Life, even survival, in all of the colonies, north, south, and in the middle, was a chancy challenge during the early years. Little wonder the colonists called upon the deity so often to intercede on their behalf. More than a little bit of luck was required to thrive in the dangerous environment of the New World. In this lecture, we learn about the hardscrabble realities of colonial life. Hardscrabble and risky though it was, however, returning to England was considered by very few. They had been sufficiently motivated to take a chance on the New World when they left home, and once here they knew that times would, indeed could, only get better if they could just survive long enough to enjoy the fruits of their labor, and have the luck to live through, or to not contract, fatal and contagious diseases, or get murdered by Indians, devoured by wolves and bears, starve or freeze to death in the winter, or shot by Spaniards or Frenchmen when they had to fight these traditional enemies of England in His Majesty's wars, which were always extended to the colonies whenever England went to war for any reason in Europe with other colonial powers. Life was, at best, precarious in the colonies throughout the 1600s and into the early 1700s. First, we will take a look at life in the southern colonies, where, for a variety of reasons, life was most vulnerable and uncertain. We will note the reasons that the introduction of slavery, which happened by accident, made the social structure increasingly fragile, and why the Southerners soon came to depend on it anyway. We follow the social evolution of the slaves themselves in their new home in the New World. It was, for them, after all, a world and an experience that they could not have imagined back home in Africa. We will examine, as well, the stratified, almost feudal world of their English masters, and discover how and why the Southern aristocratic class was almost as varied as that of their slaves. Then we will compare and contrast all of this to life in the northern colonies, in New England, which evolved almost as another country, and certainly as another culture, although the original colonists, north and south, might have been neighbors back home in England only a few generations earlier, and might even have married into each other's families. That said, we note also that, notwithstanding the profound differences between them, colonists everywhere in America still shared certain fundamental experiences and points of view, both because of the common hardships of life which had to be endured everywhere in the early primitive colonial environment, and also because almost all of the early colonists shared a common loyalty to and respect for Mother England, which went back, for some of them, 1,000 years into the mists of the fallen Roman Empire, of which Britain was itself a colony in the days of the Caesars. You might, if you listen carefully between the lines in this lecture, also begin to discern some reasons why the colonists could begin thinking of themselves, as the years marched on, less as transplanted English people and more as, well, something else, something unique, a unique people, unique in all the world, in fact. The outlines of their future, though still blurry and still on the horizon, offered, even in the early days, a new vision to anyone discerning enough to look for it, a vision of a new destiny, marching toward them as they marched toward it, with an inexorability that only Father Time could endow. The colonists were learning, and were acquiring, in the hard school of necessity, a new identity. They were becoming Americans. However halting and incremental their progress was thither, taking steps like a child, as it were. Every step a step of necessity, though, which was gradually becoming a new invention for them, the invention of an American identity, though they could not have defined it at the time, or described the process, as we can now, advantaged as we are with the historian's luxury of hindsight.